One of the things I love most about Batman fandom is, no matter your age, background, or starting point, there's a Batman for you. Much like how fans of James Bond will christen their favorite actor's portrayal of the spy as their Bond, there are many Batmans to choose from to find what is and what isn't your Batman. And there are no wrong answers. One answer that's been becoming more and more common lately is something like, Michael Keaton is my Batman, or Tim Burton did the best Batman. Quite frankly, he's become Hipster Batman. It's old enough now to be nostalgic, and against the grain of the Nolan versus ubiquitous popularity. That along with Michael Keaton being awesome in basically everything lately, and threatening none other than Russian President Vladimir Putin that he'll, quote, put the suit back on, and you've got Burtonverse fandom at an all-time high, and for good reason. It's an absolutely iconic take that did wonders for the character. It was the basis of the animated series, and in many ways kickstarted the modern superhero film. But have you sat and watched it lately? This episode of BatFacts, we're taking a look back at Tim Burton's 1989 classic, Batman. Comic book movies were in a weird place in the 80s and early 90s. First off, there weren't very many of them, and secondly, they tended to be more exploitive of a marketable character than adaptive of its source material. It's a bit of a bait-and-switch move. A movie studio releases a film with a title and imagery of a beloved property, with a story and details that are completely different for the sake of being more marketable, to placate the filmmaker's artistic vision, or fall victim to the limits of the day's technology. So in 1979, when comic book historian Michael Uslan acquired the film rights to Batman and mandated that the film represent the comic book's darker roots and act as an antithesis to the 1960s television show, it was very much going against convention. Looking at Batman 1989 through the lens of today's superhero films, the first thing you notice is a lot of missed opportunities. Little adjustments like the name of a character or location that don't alter the story at all, but bring the film into the familiar and beloved world of the comics. These touches reward longtime fans, but don't trip up casual viewers. Marvel Studios nails this concept. Batman 1989 isn't completely tone deaf to this, and does contain a couple of nods, such as Vicky Vale's photojournalism having occurred in Quarto Maltese, a fictional nation that plays a part in Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, as well as the focus on Martha's falling pearls. It's the inclusion of small details like this that make me wonder why there aren't more of them. Like Axis Chemicals, for example. Why Axis Chemicals instead of Ace? It almost seems like more effort to change the name to something so similar than to just go with the name from the comics. Granted, there's a bit more ham-fisted symbolism in there with a name like Axis, I get it, but... Speaking of Axis, one element that's done away with is the iconic Red Hood aspect of Joker's origin. But in 1989, there's no way a studio would let one of the world's most famous faces be covered with a giant red light bulb for even a second. But I think it would almost certainly be included with some level of accuracy had this film been made today. Another big mystery is, instead of being Lieutenant Max Eckhart, why isn't this character Lieutenant Harvey Bullock? Bullock had been in the comic for 15 years at that point, and they have glaring physical similarities, as well as the characters having a potential for corruption. The Monarch Theater is introduced to the Batman mythos here. In fact, as Fatman and Batman were keen to point out in their wonderful commentary track to the film, it's present in nearly every outdoor Gotham scene. Lastly, in Gotham there are no shortage of crime bosses. Carmine Falcone, Rupert Thorne, Sal Maroni. So why is Jack Palance playing Boss Grissom? This one is at least partially due to the film's convoluted and drawn-out pre-production and script process. By the time Batman was finally in production, it had the highest budget of any film ever made up to that point, estimated between $35 and $48 million. So the enormous production had to be the confluence of many factors. But there are perhaps no clearer archetypes to illustrate the battle between art and commerce better than the young auteur film director, Tim Burton, and infamous studio executive and self-proclaimed Trump of Hollywood, John Peters. Tim Burton is now a superstar director, but in 1989 he was still a young filmmaker, only having made the visually captivating Pee-wee's Big Adventure with Paul Rubens and 1988's Beetlejuice with Michael Keaton. On the cusp of 30 during production, this was Burton's first big-budget property, and he was responsible for bringing designer Anton Furst and composer Danny Elfman into the film, among others. Peters and his partner Peter Guber had been working with Uslan since early on in the development, and were coming off of a string of high-profile successes in the 80s. Peters is said to have been very hands-on with the production, and to have campaigned for unorthodox ideas such as visible Nike product placement in the Batsuit, and a soundtrack album by Michael Jackson, which of course later went to Prince. You may remember Peters from suggesting a flightless, costumeless Superman
fight a giant spider in the third act
of Kevin Smith's Superman Live script. To his credit, Peters worked hard to make it the film that it was, but you only have to look at some of Peter's ideas for Batman that didn't pan out to see just how far from the comics the film could have gotten had there not been contrasting visions at work. Officially, the script is credited to Sam Hamm and Warren Scarron, although as often was the case with productions of this magnitude, there are many other cooks in the kitchen. The first script for the project was completed as early as 1983 and was written by Superman creative consultant Tom Mankiewicz. Mankiewicz's script included the origin sequences for both Batman and Robin, the Joker as the primary villain, and the new interpretation of the Penguin. The script also included elements from a run in Detective Comics by Star-Lord creator and comic legend Steve Englehart, such as the aforementioned crime boss Rupert Thorne, love interest Silver St. Cloud, and the Joker's use of Joker gas. These issues were later collected in the Strange Apparitions trade paperback. This was the working script template through as many as 9 rewrites as the project changed hands from directors such as Joe Dante and Ivan Reitman. Upon joining the project, Burton would call the working script campy, writing his own treatment with then-girlfriend Julie Hickson. This was followed by a pair of treatments by Steve Englehart himself, who would remove Penguin and Robin's origin. Englehart would later claim that despite receiving no official credit, between the comic book inspiration and his treatments, the resulting film was 70% based on his ideas. Burton would pass screenplay duties on to known comic book fan Sam Hamm, which would be finished in late 1986. Hamm's final script would further alter the story, changing Silver St. Cloud to Vicky Vale and Rupert Thorne to Boss Grissom. He also scaled Robin's ever-dwindling role down to a single scene, which was said to have been offered to Kiefer Sutherland. But even at that stage, the script remained more true to the comic books than the final film would. Once a writer's strike effectively locked Hamm out of working any further on his script, Beetlejuice screenwriter Warren Scarron was brought in to make changes at the request of Tim Burton, which led to things like a young Joker killing the Waynes, and Alfred leading Vicky Vale into the Batcave, which Hamm vehemently denies having any part in. So I suppose that explains why, with all of these cooks in the kitchen, 10 different screenwriters, an infamous Hollywood producer pulling the strings, writer strikes, improvising stars, last-second casting adjustments, and a young director at the helm, it's understandable that this multi-million-dollar game of broken telephone, they managed to make a Batman film where Batman doesn't act much like Batman at all. Uslan's darker mandate yielded a darker Batman, but not one particularly adept at fighting crime or saving people. In the film, Batman is seen in costume for 6 scenes and has the opportunity to relinquish wrongdoing as Bruce Wayne for an additional 2. Here's how they break down. The first scene is the most obvious. As iconic an introduction to the Dark Knight as it is, the scene starts with a family being mugged in a dark alley, which, if not meant to be a red herring for an audiences expecting an origin story, is certainly an allusion to it. But then we see Batman's ominous silhouette doing nothing to stop it. Batman just watches the family get robbed and assaulted. Sure, he beats ass after the fact and leaves them with a warning to all other criminals. Tell all your friends about me. I'm gonna fight crime. Except the crime I just saw happen in front of me and did nothing to stop. By the way, remember John Peters? In the documentary, The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened? He claims that Batman's opening line, Warner Brothers made him change, was originally supposed to be, I'm Batman, motherfucker. Which, for a producer pushing the biggest corporate tie-ins and product placement for his PG-13 summer blockbuster, seems highly unlikely. Multiple versions of the script have the line as, I am the Knight, and I'm Batman. Is said to have been ad-libbed on set by Keaton. Batman next pops up at Axis Chemicals, where he saves Commissioner Gordon, but then lets Jack Napier go to murder Lieutenant Eckhart. Oh, and inadvertently creates his greatest nemesis. Later, Bruce is just hanging out and starts noticing mimes everywhere. Then the Joker shows up and murders a mob boss on the steps of City Hall in front of everybody. The mimes start machine gunning cops. Time for Batman, right? Bruce wanders passively towards them, looking like a lost child at Walmart. They escape before the world's greatest crime fighter even makes a move. Hey, Joker mime, was Bruce effective at fighting crime? No, I agree. The third scene of Batman in costume, he dramatically enters after an entire museum has been defaced and his people gassed, though it's unclear whether the gas was lethal. He makes no attempt at engaging or capturing Joker or his men, and just leaves with Vicky. Eventually, he fights a group of goons in the alleyway, but has to be saved by Vicky's persistent photojournalism. Perhaps Keaton's most memorable scene as Bruce Wayne is the infamous Let's Get Nuts scene. For some reason or another, Bruce has decided to drop by Vicky Vale's apartment for the purposes of telling her that he's Batman. Then the Joker drops by, and Bruce, being the master strategist that he is, concocts a plan to save Vicky by getting shot by the Joker? He accomplishes this by smashing Vicky Vale's perfectly good vase and screaming, "You want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts." a move Bat fan Kevin Smith would later refer to as the least Bruce Wayne thing that's ever been done in the history of anything. To what end getting shot benefits Vicky Vale in this situation remains a mystery. Did he think there was only one bullet? Bruce Wayne was using a kind of psychological ploy, Michael Keaton, who is said to have improvised portions of the scene's dialogue, would later say. Furthermore, why did the Joker come by just to leave? The scene inspires more questions than it can answer, and comes and goes without moving the film's story ahead at all. In one of the original scripts, Bruce brings along his utility belt, Vicky is kidnapped by the Joker, and Bruce makes a makeshift cowl and uses it to pursue the Joker on horseback. In fact, it was preparation for this ultimately scrapped scene that injured originally cast Sean Young, leading to Kim Basinger stepping on board as Vicky Vale. Despite the scene's shortcomings, it's not without its critical praise. Batman, A Complete History, calls it a strong scene with layers of irony and introspection showing up the fireworks and honest emotion employed as yet another mask. The scene has since been referenced directly in Batman Return of the Caped Crusader, the Lego Batman movie, and even an episode of Seinfeld. Next up, when Batman finds Joker's Smilex products are being manufactured at the place of the character's birth, Axis Chemicals, Batman simply drives over remotely, drops a bomb, and blows up everyone inside. Okay, climactic scene. Joker is atop a float in a parade, and he's throwing out money and blasting Prince music and dancing all around, about to gas everyone. Batman takes the Batwing to save Gotham City and defeat the Joker. He grabs the balloons, but then just lets them go into the sky where they will come back down. Joker's goons disperse the crowd, and then Batman misses every shot he takes and crashes the Batwing. Hamm's original script had the Joker shooting down the Batwing in a Joker-themed tank, which, while outlandish, is a little more believable than that telescoping gun. Lastly, a Batman that looked like he walked away from a plane crash begins climbing the stairs to rescue Vicky from the Joker. For some reason, he can't use the grapple, which was introduced earlier. Except when he does, to kill the Joker in a way that nobody could have planned for. How did he know that the Joker would hang on? Or the gargoyle would break? Or that it wouldn't just tear off one of his limbs, or that he'd be left dangling from it? Originally, Sam Hamm's script had him utilizing hundreds of bats who swarm around the Joker, causing him to fall, in a similar way that they were used for Batman's escape in Batman Begins and the comic book series Year One. Obviously, the film's phenomenal success wasn't hurt by these character and story notes, and the film went on to define the character for a generation. Batman and the Joker would next face off cinematically in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, which saw vastly different interpretations of both characters, but still saw Joker communicate through television, as he did in the aforementioned Strange Apparitions. Walking into a room full of gangsters and killing one to send a message to the rest is a scene that plays out almost exactly the same in both films, though it could be seen as simply a villainous trope. Also in both films, Joker standing in the middle of the street brazenly challenging Batman to attack him from a vehicle at the climax of a big city set piece. Tim Burton and company got to that first as well. But which one was more memorable? The enduring legacy of Batman 1989 isn't the confusing character motivations or the convoluted story. It's the big moments, the rousing soundtrack, the unforgettable design, and the general excitement that will forever be tied to the summer of 1989. The film's legacy carries on today with several ways to relive the magic. From Rocksteady's Batman 1989 DLC for Arkham Knight, allowing players to wear Keaton's suit and drive the Batmobile through Burtonverse-themed locales, to Hot Toys' very sought-after and meticulously detailed scale figures, to references peppering the comic books such as the name Jack Napier and other visual Easter eggs included in Sean Murphy's Batman White Knight, or this reference from the recent War of Jokes and Riddles. And with that, we're going to end our look back at Batman 89. Let me know your favorite memory of Batman 89 in the comment section. Like, subscribe, and as always, support your local comic shop. We'll see you next time. Hell yeah.